What's going on, everybody? Kalibus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 and the TCL 30XL. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where we'll be linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G Play 2023, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the TCL 30XL, we're getting a 6.82-inch LCD display. This phone also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So as far as image quality goes, these phones are pretty much the same, both having 720p resolutions that, despite only being 720p, do look decently sharp for what they are, and the colors and brightness also look pretty decent too. That being said though, of course, when it comes to size and dimensions, as you can clearly see, the TCL 30XL, being a little bit larger and having a slightly taller and more narrow form factor, does have a bit of an advantage. So I would say, while both phones are going to give you a pretty good experience when you're consuming content, if you're really going to be on your phone a lot, the TCL 30XL is going to be a little bit better. But that being said, again, for the average user, when you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, and maybe watching the occasional YouTube video every now and then, for that kind of stuff, while the TCL 30XL is still going to be the preferred choice between the two, for what it is, the Moto G Play is still going to be perfectly fine. Now for storage, with the Moto G Play, we're getting 32GB of internal storage, and with the TCL 30XL, this phone is getting 64. And like most Android phones, both phones also do have microSD card expansion. So I would definitely say, when it comes to storage, the TCL 30XL has a huge advantage, having double the internal storage of the Moto G Play. And honestly, at this point in 2023, when it comes to storage, I feel like 64GB is really more of a bare minimum, with things like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger as time goes on. With a phone like the Moto G Play that only has 32GB, even with microSD card expansion, the storage is going to fill up pretty quickly, especially if you have a bunch of apps. Whereas with the TCL 30XL, while 64GB still isn't a ton of space, again, I do personally consider it more of a minimum. For the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, and you make sure to offload everything you can to a microSD card, with this amount of storage, you should get by just fine. But with the Moto G Play, again, 32GB really is not a lot. So as a general rule of thumb here, I would say if you're planning on having a decent amount of apps, or storage is really any concern to you at all, then I would definitely consider going with the TCL 30XL here. But if you're really using your phone for the bare minimum, and you're not planning on having a lot of apps, or really doing a lot with your phone in general, then I guess in that case, the Moto G Play is still going to be okay. But again, keep in mind, even then, 32GB is just not a lot of space. So with this amount of storage, I would definitely be careful. For security features, both phones do have fingerprint scanners right here in the back. Can't go wrong with this spot. And keep in mind, the TCL 30XL does have Face Unlock, whereas unfortunately, the Moto G Play doesn't. Now, honestly, I don't think this is really that big a deal, because I feel like most people are probably fine with just a fingerprint scanner. But just keep in mind, if you really do like Face Unlock, again, the TCL 30XL does have it, whereas the Moto G Play doesn't. But starting with the Moto G Play, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the TCL 30XL. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive. No issues at all. And again, the TCL 30XL does have Face Unlock. So with this phone, if you do want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G Play, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 16 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the TCL 30XL, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. And then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. I honestly forgot this phone had such a good camera setup. For what it is, definitely impressive. So between the two, when it comes to features, the TCL 30XL having an ultra wide camera definitely does have a bit of an advantage, because keep in mind, with the Moto G Play, well, this phone at least does have a macro camera. Unfortunately, there's no ultra wide camera here. So if you do like to get those wider angle photos, then you might want to go with the TCL 30XL. In addition to this, when it comes to actual photo quality, again, I do think the TCL 30XL is significantly better, because with this phone, with a 50 megapixel camera, you can definitely expect to get some real good photos here. And while the TCL 30XL compared to something like a Moto G Stylus, for example, is not going to be quite as good, if you are looking for a really affordable device, this still has a decent amount of camera features and can take some pretty good pictures, then in that case, I would definitely say between the two, the TCL 30XL is going to be significantly better. Now to give you an idea of what these cameras can do, first, here's a couple pictures taken with the Moto G Play. In general, I definitely think these pictures are at least decent, and if you're more of a casual camera user, maybe you're taking a couple Instagram photos every now and then, or maybe using Snapchat for example, where the photo quality isn't really that important, in that kind of situation, the Moto G Play is going to be perfectly fine. And as long as you're not taking a bunch of pictures, expecting amazing photo quality. Then again, for more casual users, I do think the camera quality we're getting with the Moto G Play is at least going to be okay. And then here's some pictures taken with the TCL 30XL, and again, for what it is, I do think the photo quality here is pretty impressive. Sure, it's still not nearly as good as like a mid-range phone for example, but for a more entry-level device, I do still think the photo quality is pretty impressive. And again, compared to the Moto G Play, I do think the photo quality we're getting with the TCL 30XL is a bit better. So overall, again, if you're really more of a light user, you're not really taking a ton of pictures, and you really just need something that gets the job done for a couple photos here and there, then in that case, the Moto G Play is going to be perfectly fine. But again, if you are taking a lot of pictures, and you really do want good photo quality, and maybe you want an ultra-wide camera too, then in that case, you will want to go with the TCL 30XL. Now, when it comes to RAM and processor, with the Moto G Play, this phone has 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. With the TCL 30XL, this phone is getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A25. Now, for overall performance, while I would definitely not consider either phone to be particularly fast, I would definitely say between the two, the TCL 30XL is a bit faster. So if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, still doing more basic activities, but maybe you're doing a bit more web browsing and social media and stuff like that, then in that case, you will get a nicer and slightly smoother experience with the TCL 30XL. On the other hand, with the Moto G Play, keep in mind this is honestly a pretty slow phone, and sure, for more light occasional use, it will still get the job done. But if you are going to be on your phone a bit more, just keep in mind you will notice this is definitely not a very fast device. So again, if you are going to be on your phone a bit more, I would go with the TCL 30XL. Now, I did run benchmark tests on these phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So as you can see again, between the two, the TCL 30XL does have a bit of an advantage. And while again, keep in mind, neither phone is really particularly fast. And if you are more of a heavy user, especially doing more demanding activities, you are going to want to get a faster phone than these in general. Overall, if you are doing more light activities, and you're just going to be doing them a little bit more often, maybe you're browsing the web a lot for example, or scrolling through your social media feeds or whatever you may be doing, you definitely are going to get a maybe not super different, but still noticeably better experience with the TCL 30XL. But on the other hand, again, if you're really not using your phone a whole lot and you're just after something basic that works, then the Moto G Play will at least get the job done. Now for the batteries, both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, with the Moto G Play supporting 10W fast charging and the TCL 30XL supporting 18. So when it comes to charging speeds, while neither phone is really going to be amazing per se, on one hand the Moto G Play really isn't bad, and in my experience, unless you're expecting really lightning fast charging speeds, I feel like it's probably going to be perfectly fine for most people. And on the other hand, with the TCL 30XL, I would say it does charge a bit faster. So I guess if that is important to you, then definitely keep this in mind. Otherwise though, both phones have great battery life with 5000 mAh batteries. No matter what you're doing on them, I would definitely say for the most part, they are going to last all day. So if you are in a situation where you're not always around a charger, so you really need a phone that has good battery life, for that, either phone is going to be a great choice. And then of course, with large batteries, these phones are also going to have great longevity too. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without having to replace it, then again, either phone is going to be a great choice. Now when it comes to software, both phones currently have Android 12, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, neither phone has Android 13, but I feel like between the two, the Moto G Play is probably going to get Android 13, whereas with the TCL 30XL, it might, but I'm personally not counting on it. And honestly, if the software is really that important to you, then I would personally just go with the Samsung Galaxy A series, because those phones all have Android 13. But if you're not really that concerned about the software, but maybe you still want something at least decently newer, then in that case, either phone is going to be perfectly fine. Now, another thing to keep in mind here is that unfortunately, neither phone has NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you will have to get something else. Now, in this price range, while still being kind of disappointing, it's not really that surprising because even at this point in 2023, there aren't really a whole lot of entry-level phones like these that have NFC. Don't get me wrong, they are out there, but we're still at the point where if you really want a phone with NFC, getting a mid-range 5G phone is probably your best bet. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in pretty much every way, I would definitely say the TCL 30XL is the better device here, with a larger display and slightly better dimensions. If you're going to be on your phone a bit more, you are going to get a better experience overall. Things are going to look a bit better. And speaking of using your phone more, keep in mind that again, the TCL 30XL does have slightly better performance. If you are going to be using your device more for various activities on this phone, things are going to run a bit better. The TCL 30XL also has double the storage and a much better camera too. That also has an ultra-wide camera, whereas with the Moto G Play again, despite at least having a macro camera, unfortunately this phone doesn't have an ultra-wide camera. So in general, if you really want to maximize the features and value you're going to get for the money, the TCL 30XL is definitely the better choice here. But keep in mind, I haven't actually seen this phone phone offered through a carrier, and while I'm sure there are Amazon deals out there, you're most likely gonna have to get this phone for around full price, which is around, I believe, $179. Now, keep in mind, I have heard of people getting it for a lot less, but just know, since as far as I know, this phone is really only factory unlocked, you're never gonna actually get it for free. On the other hand though, with the Moto G Play, I believe this phone is offered through several different carriers, so between the two, while at full price, I do think the TCL 30XL is a lot more worth it. If you can find the Moto G Play for free, or at least for significantly less than the TCL 30XL, and you really are looking for a more basic device, for more basic light use, then in that case, I do think the Moto G Play will still be a pretty good option. But this concludes my comparison between the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 and the TCL 30XL. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.